What is that coffee?
Yeah.
Who provoked the Korean War? The June 25th Korean War imposed untold misfortunes and deaths upon the Korean people. Who provoked the Korean War? Who is the mastermind of the war? Here are historical facts and materials giving answers to these questions. The secret report made by the Information and Investigation Office of the U.S. Department of State reads: because of Korea's geographic position in Northeastern Asia, control over Korea and over the minds of its people is advantageous to any power with Far Eastern interests. Politically, Korea's importance to the United States is open to less dispute. Long ago, the United States spotted Korea as a forward base for realizing its strategy of world domination and as a bridge to the continent, likening it to a dagger cutting the Asian continent. The US imperialists incessantly persisted in aggression and plunder of Korea, starting with the intrusion of the ship General Sherman in 1866. Through the Catra-Taft Agreement in 1905, they actively instigated and helped the Japanese imperialists in the invasion of Korea. Towards the close of the Second World War, the brigandist US imperialists fabricated a plan to divide Korea along the 38th parallel in a cunning way. They landed on Incheon on September 8, 1945, under the guise of liberator, and occupied the whole of South Korea. Since the occupation of South Korea, the US imperialists enforced ferocious military rule. Commander of the US forces in South Korea, Hachi, declared, "The sole government of South Korea is the military government established at the order of the Supreme Commander of the US Army. The military government replaces the Japanese military government." After declaring the military government, the US imperialists extensively increased the police and directed the primary attention to the training of cannon fodder to be used in a war on the north of Korea. Since the occupation, the US imperialists dissolved the People's Committees in all parts by force of arms and stopped activities of all democratic parties and public organizations in South Korea. As their military government was faced with a strong resistance of the people, they attempted to rig up a puppet regime in a bid to realize their ambition for aggression. They suppressed the struggle of the people against a separate election with arms, and rigged up a puppet regime on May 10, 1948 by force of arms and swindle, ruthlessly trampling down the desire of the entire Korean people for reunification. After setting up the puppet regime, the US imperialists began to put spurs to war preparations. While extensively increasing the number of the South Korean army, the US imperialists enacted a military service law in order to secure a large number of reserve troops. According to the law, they conscripted many young and middle-aged people in cities and countryside and gave them military training. They also handed tremendous armament and military supplies necessary for war to the South Korean army under the name of aid. In 1949, the US imperialists formed the US military advisory offices in the divisions, regiments, and battalions of the South Korean army and completely grasped all commands, including training and operations. Under the patronage of the US imperialists, Japan too was rapidly changed into offensive base, repair base, and supply base for Korean War. Air and naval bases were rebuilt or built at important strategic points of Hokkaido and Kyushu, including Yokosuka, Korei, and Sapporo, and major heavy industrial factories and manufactories turned into munitions repairing and assembling factories. Serious economic crisis swept the United States in 1948 and 1949. In order to get rid of the crisis, the US monopoly plutocrats urged the White House to take shocking measures, and the White House decided to present them with the Korean War as a gift. From the autumn of 1949, the US political and military brass heads frequented South Korea. In those days, the United States mapped out an operational map of war and mobilized the South Korean army for more undisguised armed attacks and provocations. In 1949 alone, they made 2,617 armed invasions and provocations, 8 cases on a daily average. These figures prove the extreme frenzy for invasion of the North. In mid-February 1950, MacArthur called Syngman-rhee to Turkey and had secret talks. At the talks, he gave 11-point war instruction on triggering off Korean War before July. Syngman-rhee sent a letter to his political advisor Oliver in Washington. The letter reads, "I feel strongly that now's the most psychological moment when we should take an aggressive measure." On June 17, 1950, Dulles flew in South Korea as a special envoy of the US President so as to finally examine war preparations and confirm the date and time of the war. On June 19th, he showed up at the South Korean National Assembly and said they were ready to render all mental and material aids necessary for fighting the DPRK. Leaving Seoul, Dulles wrote a letter to Syngman-rhee. "I attach great importance to the decisive role which your country can play in the great drama that is unfolding." In this way, he disclosed the scheme of the United States. Coming to Tokyo, Dulles had 4-man secret talks with Johnson, Bradley, and MacArthur, who was standing by in the MacArthur's command, and decided on organizing the Korean War on June 25, 1950. Robert, chief of the American Military Advisory Group, said to Syngman-rhee, "We have chosen the 25th, and this explains our prudence. It is Sunday. It's the Sabbath of both the United States and South Korea, Christian states. No one will believe we have started the war on Sunday." According to secret directive, planes began to be unveiled in the hangars, and more bombers and fighters were sent to the US Air Force in Japan. Pilots under the US Far Eastern Forces were on standby, and an emergency alert order was issued to all units of the South Korean Army along the 38th parallel. Some hours before the start of the war, the families of the US officers were secretly sent to Japan by a Norwegian ship. people of the DPRK were spending June 24th Saturday as an ordinary day. On June 25, 1950, the South Korean Puppet Army, at the instigation of the United States, starts an all-out attack on the DPRK, and taking advantage of its temporary ascendancy, intruded 2 kilometers north of the 38th parallel. In a book he wrote later, MacArthur confessed, the Army of the North was deployed for defense, not for attack. That is why the world people unanimously denounced that both the 38th parallel and the Korean War were products of the United States. The Korean War was precisely a direct product of the aggressive foreign policy of the Britons using imperialists to dominate the world, and the premeditated war provoked on the basis of specific preparations.
Okay, we'll go to the next round now. And before you go, you put your pen in your cup over here to